Good day, everyone. These videos were created as a result of a questionnaire conducted amongst teenagers and young adults of what the various mental health challenges they face in this day and age. This questionnaire was conducted anonymously so they could be as honest as possible and not be concerned about the stigma attached to asking such personal questions. Numerous mental issues and questions were identified by this group, which this video addresses. And as much as these videos are of value to teenagers and young adults, they are also highly recommended for the parents of this Generation Z, as this age group may be addressed, and anyone else who in fact engages with them or instructs them in some way or the other. So let's dive right into it, the type of questions that were asked, and we're going to provide a succinct answer to these set of questions. Our parents are not prepared to address mental health issues in their children. Mental health is not taken seriously. It is looked down upon with shame, fear, avoidance, and secrecy. How do we deal with this? Mental health is seen by our parents as something that is just in your head. So how do we collectively debunk the stigma with the older generation? And how do we get rid of the toxicity which they contribute to? Should we not have been having this talk with the older generation and educate the older generation on this matter? So basically, these teenagers and young adults are asking, how do we address these mental health challenges with their parents? Firstly, let's understand the challenges between older generation and younger generation. There will always be a generation gap between parents and children. This is the way of the world. As the life of one generation to the next changes, it is not a new phenomenon. Yet, for teenagers and young adults, this gap in this day and age has widened even more. This is mainly due to technology and the way new tech has provided a door to a whole new cyber world through one smart device, and you know what I'm talking about. One app, and you can access 4.5 billion people and increasing day by day. You can visit Mars and check out what that rover is doing on the planet there, and at the same time order pizza. This entire world is at your fingertips, including the rover on Mars. You can invite Taylor Swift to your party and have the power to initiate a global movement for world peace. The teenagers and adults of today, you are living in a world that is amazingly different to any other generation, as well as definitely the one your parents grew up in, who have no clue even how to access the world. And even if they did, they probably forgot their password and username and probably calling you to access it. Therefore, many of your parents and older generation simply have no understanding or little understanding of the world you operate in. The technology know-how itself is a barrier to entry that makes them afraid of entering that world. Every new app that comes out it presents a barrier that they just don't want to address. So your parents, and most of them might be born between the 1960s to 1980s, they're known as the Generation X's and the Generation Ys. And their education regarding mental health was from a perspective rather of fear and shame. Not their fault, but because unfortunately that was the prevailing culture where mental health was in fact demonized. They were told and they had to just get on with their life at a physical, mental and emotional level. Any mental or emotional expression was generally socially seen as a weakness. They had to give in. They had to give an impression, should I say, of strength, even if it meant putting on a facade. They certainly don't want to do that for their kids. This current mental world is new to them and they struggle to understand it. It might very well have been likely that your parents or their parents focused their lives on basic survival. Their priority was to avoid poverty and danger. They had to just provide the food and educate the kids. That was all they saw their life about, even if it meant working from 4 a.m. in the morning to the late hours of the night. To understand his psychology, in fact, we need to look at a concept, bear with me, what is called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This pyramid, Maslow was a psychologist, he came up with this pyramid that addressed our motivation, these 5 basic levels. And from the bottom up, imagine this pyramid, the first bottom basic level was, first you need to meet your psychological needs. And this is your food and your clothing. Then you need to meet your safety needs. So get a job, security, make sure our family is safe, make sure they go to school. And you all know what I'm talking about, right? Because this is what your parents have been doing and they say to you. Then once these first 2 needs are met, then people focus on love and belonging. So this means friendships, happy relationships, happy homes, religion, etc. Then the 4th level, imagine we're getting to the apex now, is where humans seek self-esteem. And in fact, I'm probably addressing more where the generation Z is coming from. You youngsters, I'm calling you that, teenagers and young adults. And thereafter, humans seek self-actualization. So in the lingo of today, it would be finding your purpose, meaning, truth, finding your cause, making a difference to the world. And I know this resonates more with people of this generation, the young adults and teenagers, where they're able to give back to society, contribute, and follow your passion. And you know, this is something your parents, when you tell them this, they're like completely clueless. Because most parents were caught up in the first 2 basic levels, providing the food, the shelter, the security, the education. This is the survival game and they're still playing it. They feel they don't have the time, nor do they know how to deal with their own emotional and mental health. And they will tell you even how they sacrifice a lot of blood, sweat, tears, focusing on providing a foundation for you. They will tell you where they had to grin and bear the tough situations in life. They believe they had taken care of food, home, safety, education. So now you must go into the world and achieve a better life, because that's what they've done. They've provided the basics. Their main focus was to ensure once they provided the basics for you. So now you have to go forth and achieve academically, because that's the world they knew and that they know will make your life better. Matters of the mind to them was a luxury, because the hamster wheel they ran in didn't enable for that. For them, they just sat, contemplated. Reflecting on mental, emotional health was something they just left behind. If they had to contemplate and reflect, it was on doing their job better. So they struggle to understand this mental world and the challenges you face. I know many of you call your world or call the family home toxic. When you call it toxic, it's just the older generation trying to deal with this new world with their old coping styles and tools. They are clueless, some of them. And yes, part of their role is to give them new tools to better understand and deal with their children's new reality. And in contrast to the older generations, the current generation of teenagers and young adults, you know this, you live in your minds. That in itself is a world, a universe, is in the mind that is so powerful. In fact, in the mid to late 1990s, that would be the starting birth years, and to the early 2010 as ending birth years, most members of that generation most members are Generation Z, and therefore are children of Generation X. As the first social generation, you have grown up with access to the internet and to portable digital technology from a very young age. You know how to swipe, be it right, left, or whatever it might be, before your parents even figure out how to run their finger over the screen. You belong to that Generation Z or I-Geners as they are called. In fact, you are seen, and this is studies done, that you are much more tolerant of others, be it different cultures, different races. In fact, you and I know that in itself can be a source of conflict between you and your parents, because they kind of grew up in their own world. They were clueless of other cultures and races. You, interestingly enough, can be more cautious at times because you're wary of the demons and the dragons in terms of people out there. Interestingly enough, you're more likely to think for yourself and not believe authority figures Back then, if you did that, you were somewhat seen as a radical rebel back in the 1960s or 70s. In fact, it was commonly said that you were radical and rebellious if you thought for yourself and didn't believe in authority figures. The other fact I do know categorically, because I've seen it, is that you are amazingly intelligent. I'm not just saying that. It's based on scientific fact. Your brains are more wired than your parents' brains are. You can access information that took your parents 2 weeks to access. They had to go to a library. You now can access that information in 2 minutes. Your minds are constantly working, thinking, exploring cyberspace, and you are going places that generations before wrote about in science fiction novels and never thought would be true. You guys see it as real on a daily basis. So, mental health challenges, given you live in that world, are more prevalent amongst the Generation Z. It is sometimes referred to as the loneliest generation. As interestingly enough, yes, you are going online on a daily basis for hours on end, and going online fosters feelings of isolation and definitely can lead to depression. You know this again, the cyber world can be a lonely place. As much as you are communicating with others, you don't have many a time, often enough, an emotional connection. Since, as much as it seems we are engaging through various filters, walls and facades. The cyber world, you've experienced this, can be absolutely fake, delusional at times, and many a time just a figment of an imagination. Therefore, as a younger generation, your battles, as much as they can be physical, occur very much in the mind. For example, your parents' life, they would have told you, was working long hours to provide. Whereas you are at an age where you take gap years, you figure out your passion, your purpose, you march against global warming, and you do what your mind chooses to do. They will never completely understand the challenges in the world you live in. They are far too wired, if I can call it that, to survive and hopefully thrive in the world they live in. So, as a teenager or young adult, you see the world very differently to your parents and how they see it. Reinforced further by you entering a completely different world by literally touching a screen. In fact, you and I, in a manner of speaking, having this conversation is merely by you touching the screen and getting there within 2 seconds. If you ask your parents to access this talk, they'll probably take maybe an hour or two and ask you for help. So the question obviously comes up, how do we deal with your parents? How do we deal with them? 1, treat them with compassion, love, and understanding. You can access more information than they can. You understand this technological world far better than them. And that takes us to number 2. And this is a tough statement, but it's got to be made nonetheless. Understand that most parents do indeed love you. And they actually do want you to win in your life. This is what they will work for. Yet recognize that they don't know that the rules of the game have changed. What they consider winning, their goalposts were very different to where you are. You are seeing way into the future. They can just see hopefully a few years ahead. They don't recognize it. It doesn't make sense to them at a logical and rational level. So understand that they do love you and they want you to win. And they want you to win, yes, on their terms, but they want you to build upon that. And again, taking us to point 3, understand that they are expressing their language of love in the manner that they were conditioned to. They parent as best that they know how. They want you to far surpass them in health, wealth, wisdom, and happiness. You are a new, far more intellectual generation than they were. So you have the power and a responsibility to make it work. And I think of the words power and responsibility like when we discuss superheroes. With power comes great responsibility. I'm not saying we can fly through walls and buildings, But with you, your power is at an intellectual level, and that puts you over and above your parents. In fact, many of your parents, in terms of the knowledge and skill they have, if they had to go out there now and start looking for a job for the first time, they probably wouldn't qualify. And yes, then, together with your parents, we will be able to bridge the gap between generations. So rather than reacting to your parents, respond from an understanding and love perspective. Most of the time, I agree it's not all the time, they mean well, and they're looking out for your absolute welfare. So please, compassion, kindness and caring, in spite of how they may behave and the situations you find yourself in. That gives you power, and that way it gives you responsibility for yourself and the moods and emotions you are going through. Thank you.